Welcome, everyone. I'm Barbara Call, Senior Director of Content Strategy with CIO Marketing Services. Welcome to today's webcast, where our panel of experts will discuss the growing maturity of hyperconverged infrastructure and how HCI is helping enterprises on the path to hybrid cloud. I have three speakers with me today. First up is Carol Silwa, Research Director with IDC's Infrastructure Platforms and Technologies Group. Welcome, Carol.
Thanks, Barbara.
Next up is Jeff Woolsey, Principal Program Manager for Azure Edge and Platform at Microsoft. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
And our third speaker is Christine McMonigal, Director of Hyperconverged Marketing at Intel. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks, Barbara, and hello, everyone.
We have a packed agenda today, starting with HCI market overview and adoption trends from Carol. Jeff will follow to discuss the growing demand for hybrid cloud environments and how Azure services make it easier to deploy and monitor hybrid cloud environments. Christine will then talk about Intel's role in accelerating infrastructure transformation across the enterprise. And we'll have a wrap-up discussion with our speakers to share our final thoughts. And now I'll turn things over to Carol for the IDC perspective.
Thanks, Barbara. I'd like to take my portion of today's presentation to tell you about some of the trends IDC is seeing with hyperconverged infrastructure, especially in edge, hybrid cloud, and container deployments. Much of the information is based on surveys we conducted in the latter half of 2021. First of all, I'll provide a brief overview of hyperconverged infrastructure. Hyperconverged infrastructure has matured considerably in the past decade and given enterprises a chance to simplify the way they deploy, manage, and maintain IT infrastructure. As many of you probably know, it consolidates compute, storage, and networking technology into a single server, so enterprises can shift away from the three-tier architectures that generally had required them to hire IT staff with special skills to provision and operate. IDC research shows that close to 3/4 of the enterprises using hyperconverged infrastructure replaced their traditional storage area networks and network-attached storage systems when it came time to refresh their technology. And HCI adoption has been broad among enterprises of all sizes. More than 80% plan to continue to move in the direction of hyperconverged infrastructure for their core infrastructure going forward. There are plenty of reasons for that, not least of which is the opportunity to unify the management of their compute, storage, and networking resources, potentially across data center, edge, and cloud sites. Reducing complexity can be especially important for companies with limited IT staffs and budgets who need to provide infrastructure for remote and branch offices. Hyperconverged infrastructure can also help companies scale quickly at a reasonable cost whenever their needs change. A couple of examples of problems that hyperconverged infrastructure can help to address include virtual desktop infrastructure, often called VDI, when it's become complicated to expand. Another problem that hyperconverged infrastructure can help to solve is a workload consolidation project that can be difficult to size. HCI lets companies take advantage of the latest compute, storage, and networking technologies to meet the needs of even performance-demanding workloads such as databases and analytics. Customers have the opportunity to buy hyperconverged infrastructure as an integrated appliance or software they can run on general-purpose commodity servers. The chart on the right shows the forecast for the appliance form factor, and it's clear that hyperconverged infrastructure use will continue to grow at a steady pace. The compound annual growth rate, as you can see, is 9% through 2026. Our research shows that enterprises increasingly are using hyperconverged infrastructure for some of their most important workloads. More than half told us they run mission-critical applications on hyperconverged infrastructure, and they'd be comfortable putting even more workloads on HCI if they got better quality of service controls, faster and more granular local recovery options, and higher compute performance, throughput, and memory capacity in their HCI nodes. Another trend we're seeing is concerning edge use. Our surveys have shown that today, most enterprises run hyperconverged infrastructure in central data centers or co-location facilities that contain their primary compute and storage systems. But as you can see, many organizations run HCI in edge locations that are located away from the central or core IT site, in closer proximity to remote endpoints that generate or collect data, such as IoT devices or surveillance cameras. It can be tough to move all that data that those devices collect, and it often makes sense to shift the processing analysis to the edge site, where hyperconverged infrastructure can be an effective choice. All signs point to the edge becoming an increasingly popular location for hyperconverged infrastructure. An overwhelming majority of the enterprises we surveyed said they think the converged nature of HCI makes it a better architecture for edge deployments than the traditional three-tier IT architectures they've been using. And those three-tier architectures have separate compute, storage, and networking components. And as I said, they often require special skills to manage. Close to 70% said they plan to move even more in the direction of HCI at edge sites going forward. The most important capabilities that enterprises are looking for when they buy hyperconverged infrastructure for edge deployments are security, the product's integration with public cloud services, integrated data protection, and automated systems management. And the top workloads they're running on hyperconverged infrastructure at the edge are IoT applications, business applications of a variety of types, including customer relationship management, enterprise risk management, system control management, security applications, analytics and infrastructure management, databases. Artificial intelligence and machine learning workloads are also running on HCI at the edge. Hyperconverged infrastructure also makes a lot of sense for enterprises that are taking a hybrid cloud approach with infrastructure that spans on-premise and public cloud sites. Many organizations are pursuing digital transformation initiatives, and hyperconverged infrastructure can serve as an on-ramp to the public cloud. Simplified deployment and management also help them to stay agile as their DevOps teams build new applications to try to gain more business value from the data they've been collecting. HCI can also make it easier to migrate data, virtual machines, and workloads between private and public clouds. And because the hyperconverged infrastructure is software defined, it can run on appliances or industry standard servers anywhere and unify management across their on-premises and public cloud environments. Our survey data shows that just about every organization that deploys hyperconverged infrastructure connects their on-premises HCI clusters to the public cloud. Only 1% of the organizations we surveyed told us they had no HCI clusters linked to the public cloud. The top reason they're connecting those clusters to the cloud is that they want a unified management console for the workloads they run on premises and in the cloud. Many of them also want to access public cloud resources to burst workloads on a short-term basis. That's quite common, for instance, with retailers that need to expand their infrastructure on demand to handle spikes in traffic during the holiday season. Many organizations also connect HCI clusters to the public cloud to back up and archive data or to plan for disaster recovery. Yet another reason enterprises said they connect HCI clusters to the public cloud is for application development and testing. Hyperconverged infrastructure runs on standard server hardware and offers DevOps teams an economical way to test and deploy their applications. And many of those applications are increasingly cloud native and container-based. And IDC research shows that hyperconverged infrastructure has become a popular choice for containerized applications. More than 3/4 of the organizations we surveyed said they currently run production workloads in containers on hyperconverged infrastructure. And another 18% told us they plan to start running production workloads in containers on hyperconverged infrastructure within 12 months. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some information on important trends we're seeing with respect to hyperconverged infrastructure. And now I'm going to pass the baton to Jeff Woolsey, who's going to tell you about Microsoft's work in the area of hyperconverged infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Carol. I appreciate that. Greetings, everyone. And as I was listening to Carol, I feel like I'm going to be echoing a lot of her comments over and over. It's interesting to see how that survey data from IDC and how their work lines up exactly to what we're seeing. Let me start off by saying, folks, we hear you loud and clear. And hybrid and multi-cloud is 100% a game changer for digital transformation. And I want to be super clear about something. Hybrid and multi-cloud is the long-term durable state, period. Full stop. It's been years since someone said to me, oh, we're not going to go to the cloud, we're just going to stay on-prem. Or even the opposite, we're going to move 100% to the cloud. Those are super, 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 super edge cases. The vast majority, 95+% of companies that I talk with and customers that I talk with say, oh no, we are absolutely in the hybrid cloud game. We absolutely are moving things to the cloud. We're taking advantage of the resources, the capabilities, the services that are offered, the agility that we get from the cloud. But there are plenty of reasons why we need to keep things on premises. We need to attach to legacy systems with custom requirements. We have to deal with regulations or data sovereignty. Perhaps we've got latency because we're talking to some of those legacy systems, like we see in manufacturing, for example. Well, 82% of enterprises remain hybrid. 92% of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy. We are seeing it everywhere. Well, what is this about? What is this digital transformation? What is driving hybrid and multi-cloud? Well, first of all, there's app modernization and innovation. Certainly, folks have existing applications that they continue to use and perhaps building on those, but they're also building new applications. And there's new technologies and innovation they can take advantage of, like machine learning and AI. Also, of course, with the cloud, you have cloud and infrastructure management. And you're going to hear me use the word management a lot in my section, because as Carol was saying, you know, the top reason that they're seeing people using HCI in a hybrid environment is they want a unified management console. This is critical. It's about easing and making it better for your organization to go faster, easing deployment, easing management, easing maintenance. Well, for that, management is key. And of course, data, and more data. As we see industries growing and deploying more applications, more edge devices, more sensors, we are seeing incredibly powerful systems now that fit in the palm of your hand. And people are realizing, wow, I can capture more information about the environment. I can capture more about my manufacturing, my retail environment, my healthcare environment. All of these things, can I use this to provide more data to help me provide better services for my organization and for my customers? Well, that means you're also capturing a lot more data, and latency becomes a challenge. How do you manage all of that? How do you find the key insights in all of that? So there's a number of things we're going to discuss here today. Now, when it comes to Azure hybrid and multi-cloud customers, I just want to be very clear here. I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about a future case. I'm talking about customers that are doing this right now. Customers like Fujitsu, SKF, KPMG, John Deere, Nokia, and so many more. These are our customers that are already doing hybrid, they're already doing multi-cloud, they're seeing massive successes with it. You'll find our customer case studies, and we continue to grow and grow. And this is just a small sampling of customers that are taking advantage of our hybrid and multi-cloud services. So, as Carol was saying, HCI-enabled hybrid cloud. What are the things, I'm going to echo a few of the things that Carol was saying. Number one, HCI often replaces traditional SANs. Oh my goodness, yes. This is a repeated pattern we have seen where customers are going, historically I purchased traditional SANs, but they require bespoke hardware, bespoke training. It's a separate thing. It's its own expense. Well, they're realizing, with HCI, I can get even better performance. And guess what? The same team that's managing my compute, my virtual machines, guess what? It's all incorporated in terms of storage. So HCI often replaces traditional SANs. Also, 80% plan to shift more in the direction of HCI for core infrastructure going forward. That was a point that Carol made. Well, why is that? Because customers are interested in simplifying this. They are interested in simplifying deployment, management, and maintenance. And again, that management is key. And the top reason is customers tell us over and over again, we want a single unified management console. And what that means is, it means that consistent cloud leads to operational efficiency. Let's go back 10 years. Let's go back 15 years before cloud is a thing, okay? How did customers deploy infrastructure? You buy a bunch of servers, you buy a bunch of storage, you set up your networks. Then you buy enterprise management solutions, which means you got to set up a bunch of databases. You've got to configure those for high availability. Then you deploy your enterprise management solution for backup, for monitoring, for patching, for analysis, for orchestration. And guess what? Then a new version comes out and you have to update that. And by the way, all of that infrastructure, all of those databases, that's just to enable the infrastructure. That's not even doing anything yet. So there's a lot of work to actually manage your own infrastructure. People are realizing, wait a minute, if I use the cloud, then guess what? That monitoring is there. That patching is there. That lifecycle management, it's there. Backup, replication, disaster recovery, it's all there. Well, with Azure Stack HCI, it provides central monitoring and comprehensive configuration management. This is built into the box. The first thing you do when you deploy an Azure Stack HCI is you basically click on a link and you register it with Azure. Once you do that, guess what? Your Azure Stack HCI that's running on your premises, under your control, appears in Azure. Now, all of a sudden, you can manage that Azure Stack HCI from the cloud. Now you have consistent cloud management. You want to create VMs in Azure? Great. You create a VM in Azure. You want to create a VM in Azure Stack HCI running on-prem? Use the same create VM, except target your Azure Stack HCI on-prem. So now, all of a sudden, you're training your IT team. Guess what? This management, we're all using the same tools. It's consistent, whether you're in the cloud or on-prem. And this solves a big challenge that we've heard time and time again from our customers, which is, hey, you know what? I'm managing my on-prem one way, and this is how we've been doing it for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I look at cloud and I have to manage it another way, and they are completely different. And you know what? Yeah, we recognize that challenge. That is huge, because your team that has been running and managing your on-premises, they know all of the wacky little tools and things that they have created, and all of these tools that they have created to manage. But what if you could say, guess what? It's all the same set of tools. Learn the Azure portal, learn monitoring, learn lifecycle management, and guess what? It manages your on-prem the same way. Also, this means you get data application and workload mobility. Because now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I need to replicate a VM. Okay, I can select a virtual machine and say, guess what, I'm going to replicate this up to Azure, and boom, bada bing, it's done. Also, Azure Stack HCI facilitates management of core data center, remote, and multi-cloud resources. As I said, and Carol said earlier, as we're seeing more and more deployment at the edge quite honestly, is exploding when it comes to growth. Massive growth at the edge. And part of the beauty of it is Azure Stack HCI can start as small as 2 nodes. That's right, 2 nodes, so small that you could put them in your backpack, put them in the overhead compartment on a plane. That's how small. You can deploy 2 nodes, and guess what? All of a sudden, if you've got lots of retail, if you've got lots of branch offices, I want to deploy 2 nodes in 25 restaurants, 50 coffee shops, 100 healthcare locations, 500 bank branch locations, whatever. Guess what? Now, all of that management can be seen and done through Azure. So, just to be very super clear about this, our mission with Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc is to deliver the best of Azure to you on your servers that you control on your premises. I want to be extremely stark about this because I always get people going, well, it's called Azure, Jeff, so it must be cloud. I'm like, well, it's cloud connected, absolutely, but this is running on your servers that you control. This is running on your premises because, again, we know there are reasons like data sovereignty, regulatory, latency, where you need it to actually run in a specific location for those reasons. So, what is Arc? I talked about Stack HCI, but what is Arc? Because a lot of people, I get this question asked all the time. Well, Arc is for customers looking to innovate anywhere. Azure Arc is a bridge for the Azure ecosystems of services and applications to run on a variety of hardware and IoT devices across Azure, multi-cloud data centers, and edge environments. That's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is it provides a consistent and flexible development operations and security model for both new and existing applications. So to be clear, Azure Arc does 2 things, and I'll be honest with you. From a Microsoft standpoint, we've been pretty good about messaging the second one, which is, hey, if you install the Azure Arc agent on your Windows Server, on your Linux, on your Kubernetes, you can manage those from the cloud. We haven't been as good about the first one, which is Azure Arc allows you to deploy Azure services on premises. That's the one I'm very excited about. That's the one I kind of want to drill into right now. So let's talk about what Azure Arc does, and I'm going to talk about 4 specific scenarios. First, deploying cloud native and operating anywhere. Cloud innovation, honestly, it's radically changed the way applications are designed, built, and run. For an application to be truly portable, it needs more than just shipping and packaging code. You need cloud services. You need the container infrastructure. You need the DevOps practices and tooling to deploy, secure, and operate it. With Azure Arc, you can build and modernize to cloud-native apps on Kubernetes, K8s, using familiar tools and Azure services. You can implement consistent GitOps and policy-driven deployment and configuration across environments. And you can integrate Azure monitoring, security, and compliance into your DevOps toolkits. You have a policy that you need to deploy, guess what? It's just part of your development. You need to implement consistent GitOps, so when there's a change, guess what? That change is automatically pushed out. It's there. So that's developing cloud native, operate anywhere. Next, we have real-time insights. So many of you are excited about the opportunities to extend cloud technology across your IT estate. Some of you had opportunity bypass you because of slow analysis of data trapped in legacy systems. Others want to use AI and machine learning to accelerate insights and shift from reactive to proactive decision making. Some are creating fresh data insights by implementing IoT in innovative real-time applications. For those scenarios, Azure Arc is built to help you harness data insights from cloud to edge. Specifically, what I mean by this is you can create applications faster with an end-to-end solution from local data collection, storage, and real-time analysis. You can improve operational efficiency through consistent data and AI tools, services, and automation. You can reduce management overhead and risk exposure through integrated security and governance tools for data. Pretty exciting stuff, huh? Here comes the third one. This one generates a lot of interest. Not that the first 2 didn't, but this one, security and governance across environments. We all see what's going on around the world. We see that the bad guys are doing everything they can to attack systems in every vertical out there. Well, The advances in cloud and edge technologies are enabling organizations to reinvent and scale their businesses in ways that we could only imagine just a few years ago. Many companies have made investments in hundreds or even thousands of applications, yet these applications are distributed across multiple data centers, branch offices, edge locations, and cloud platforms. Now, to top it off, new applications are being built leveraging cloud-native technologies that are changing at an incredible pace. Azure Arc enables you to use the security and governance tools we use in Azure on a wide range of resources such as Windows, Linux, Kubernetes, and SQL Server. And yes, delivering this on premises. So with Azure Arc, you can use cloud-based threat detection, response, and analytics. You can easily adapt through dynamic visibility, compliance, and audit, and you can foster collaboration with shared tools for apps, data, and infrastructure. One of the things I love so much about this is because you're sharing the tools, because you're sharing the same management together, your teams can work closer and actually reduce the friction between teams. Because guess what? You all have a common understanding. And finally, flexibly meeting regulatory and connectivity needs. There are two primary motivators that most hybrid needs arise from: connectivity requirements and regulations. Azure has amazing connectivity options and a host of certifications, but there are always scenarios that require more custom solutions, and we want to make it as easy as possible for you to address those concerns when planning how to build hybrid environments. Azure Arc-enabled infrastructure can help you meet residency and sovereignty needs with a variety of infrastructure options. And you can simplify your edge computing infrastructure for low latency applications. You can also operate fully or intermittently connected from the internet, even for long periods of times. So you can see now, I know I spent a lot of time talking about Arc here, but it's critical for you to understand how this fits into our hybrid and multi-cloud strategy. Quite honestly, it's the linchpin. And Azure Stack HCI plugs into this automatically. Now, on top of Azure Stack HCI, you can run AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. You can run managed Kubernetes on Azure Stack HCI. And here's a familiar pattern we keep running into. Developers go to build new applications, go to create new applications for their organization. What do? They start in the cloud. They start writing their containers, they push into AKS. Guess what? It just works. They incorporate it into their CI/CD pipeline. They enable GitOps. Guess what? As they develop new versions, it's automatically pushed to AKS, and everything runs. And of course, AKS just automatically scales. It'll scale out. It'll handle everything for you because it's a managed service. Everything runs great. And then the boss comes down and says, hey, by the way, this is awesome. We love this app. We also need this to run on-prem, though, because we've got a couple of locations where regulatory could be a concern, latency could be a concern. Now, all of a sudden, you're going, okay, well, how do we deploy these in a consistent way on-prem? That's where AKS comes in. You can take your AKS applications and say, hey, I'm just going to point this to my AKS running on Azure Stack HCI. So you can develop an AKS, but deploy unmodified to the edge. So it's not like you have to tell your developers, oh yeah, you need to make a whole bunch of changes for it to run, because that's not going to make them happy. You just say, no, it's the same AKS, just push it over there, and guess what, it'll just run. What this means also is it's an opportunity to modernize your older Windows and Linux apps. So if you got like .NET frameworks, you got Core, you got Java, things like that, ideal candidates to modernizing containers. And then on top of all of this, now we get to the key thing, is we're delivering Azure services on premises. Now think about that. How many times have you been using a cloud service and you go, boy, this is really awesome. I really wish I could be able to do this on-prem because, you know what, I have a regulatory concern. That's exactly what we're doing with Arc-enabled PaaS services on Azure Stack HCI. SQL managed instances, PostgreSQL hyperscale, app services, functions, logic apps, API management. Let's start with my favorite. Just start with SQL managed instances, because this, quite honestly, is gold. Today, if you want to deploy a SQL server, what do? Well, you've got your SQL server. It's probably running on, well, if it's in production, of course, you're running on highly available infrastructure. You've got to manage that. You've got to patch DOS. You've got to manage SQL. You've got to patch SQL. If the database needs to scale, you need to deal with that. In the cloud, You just take your database and you just point it at Azure SQL, managed instances, and guess what? It handles all that for you. You need to patch the OS? Nope, don't need to do any of that. Why? Because we patch it for you. If a patch comes out for SQL, guess what? We patch that for you. You don't need to deal with it. If your database needs to scale because guess what? It's the holiday season and you're getting crushed by 4 times as many people hitting the database, guess what? It'll automatically scale for you. It's amazing. And people love SQL managed instances in the cloud. What if I told you you could have that on-prem too? Fully managed SQL instance with built-in management capabilities to make your management just reduce a ton of that management overhead. We handle the patching. We handle the, there's no OS to deal with. There's no SQL to deal with. You just post your database and go. People love it. And now we are delivering SQL managed instances on premises. If you're a Postgres shop, if you're doing Hadoop, guess what? Right behind you, that's in preview right now. We'll have some updates on that shortly. If you're building new powerful web, mobile, and API apps using .NET, Java, Node, PHP, Python, App Services makes it so easy to do this. And again, we handle it as a managed service. So it makes life for your developers, it makes life for your IT team really easy. Functions for serverless, logic apps for quickly building integrated solutions, creating workflows and API management, and so much more. But the point being here is HCI plugs into the cloud. It gives you simplified management. It gives you simplified deployment. And we're delivering cloud services on premises. Let me give you an example of a typical HCI deployment that we are seeing. Here's a pattern that we are seeing in manufacturing. Now, people are deploying their stack HCIs. And sure, they're using traditional virtual machines because maybe they got some applications that are running Windows Server, Linux, whatever, and they're taking advantage of that. But they're also building new applications. They're building new web apps. They also want to take advantage of a lot of data that's running in these manufacturing environments. Well, guess what? That SQL managed instances running Arc Data Services, also running on Stack HCI. What we see happen is that data is running, provides real-time analysis there at the edge. Then what happens is, if say you've got 50 manufacturing sites, what we are seeing is people are taking that data services from each of those 50 sites. They are uploading it to the cloud, and then they're using machine learning and AI to run against their data models and their algorithms. And they're comparing it across those 50 sites. And they are teaching the model and improving the model. Then they push that updated model back to the edges on Azure Stack HCI. So with Azure Arc Data Services, you get your analysis going on at the edge. It can be real time right there what you need because you've got real time manufacturing. But then you can also harvest that data, aggregate that data in the cloud, perform analysis, and actually improve your manufacturing at the edge. It's incredible. And then, of course, higher up in Azure Cloud, of course, think about this from a security standpoint. Obviously, you want a consistent policy. You want consistent security. You want policy that you can push to every one of these. So every one of your apps, every one of your solutions has the exact same policy running. And maybe you have policy that's different. Maybe you have some manufacturing in the EU. Maybe you have some in the US. Maybe there's different policy based on privacy requirements on the EU. Fine, push down specific EU policy from Azure policy to those EU located manufacturing sites and push down US ones to your Azure policy in there. But know that they are consistent and that Azure is monitoring that. So if someone accidentally or mistakenly goes and makes a change that actually violates a policy, it will go fix it automatically for you. So these are just one example of the benefits we are seeing here. So the way we think about it is, look, as you're modernizing your organization and your apps, use Azure services. We have 200 plus services. We manage the cloud infrastructure. We have our own data center hardware. We have the most in the industry with the most regions around the world. We have global distributed capacity. And by the way, you have the security, operations, and governance. You have Defender. You have Azure Resource Monitor. You have Monitor Policy. And for those folks that say, hey, this is great, but I also need this on-prem, well, guess what? Now you get consistency. You can run Azure Stack HCI, you can run Azure Arc-enabled infrastructure, and you can have Azure Arc-enabled services like SQL Managed Instance, Logic Apps, and more. And all of this being managed from the Azure control plane. Like I said, like Carol said, the top reason that we are seeing HCI is people want a unified management console, that hybrid integration of HCI with the cloud. Finally, I always get questions about performance. And this is where the relationship that we have had with Intel that spans decades just shines. The work that we have done so closely with Intel to make sure that we can provide performance for the most demanding workloads it blows my mind at the performance we are seeing. It truly does. I remember 2010, you were lucky if you could get 100,000 IOPS out of your storage. You were lucky. You had racks and racks full of disks, and if you tuned and tweaked optimally everything and all of your servers and all of your storage and all of your, maybe, if everything lined up perfectly, maybe you could get 100,000 IOPS. With Azure Stack HCI, we are easily delivering over 1 million IOPS per server. Per server. We are taking advantage of the latest performance optimizations. RDMA, latest NICs, 25, 40, 50, 100 gigabit RDMA NICs, PMEM, Optane, NVMe. The performance is staggering. 2 gigabytes per second I/O throughput. 0.4 milliseconds I/O responsing. Latency? What latency? There is no latency. 2.62 million SQL Server new orders per minute. Don't believe me. Please don't. Take a look at the ESG technical validation. That's aka.ms ESG technical validation. I also want to announce, I'm very excited about this, Azure Stack HCI single node. What? Did you just say single node, Jeff? Absolutely. So I said before that we could scale down to 2 nodes. And guess what? People love it. Customers that say, you know what? I absolutely need high availability. I need to deploy at the edge. Absolutely. But guess what? There's some folks who want us to go even smaller. They say, you know what? We are super comfortable with the hardware that we're getting. It's super reliable. You use eCC memory. We're using state-of-the-art storage. These servers are, you know what? I'm not worried about that. And I'll make sure, of course, that it's on a power supply. It's on UPS. I have locations where I need actually just a single node, and it's physical constraints, it's power constraints, it's cost constraints, whatever. So due to customers asking for this, we are now bringing the benefits of hybrid to single node. So you can have a smaller footprint. You can still take advantage of that Azure native integration with Azure Arc, and it's great for all sorts of environments. And of course, if you're building containers, you can deliver the HA solution at the application layer. Now keep in mind, it's still single node, so if you have to reboot the server, guess what? You're going to have some downtime. But there are plenty of customers that said, we can schedule that. We're fine with that. So I'm super excited about the Azure Stack HCI single node. It offers the full SDDC stack, the Azure Arc integration. Again, it's just built in. There's no extra scripts. There's no extra agents. There is no extra nonsense. It's just built in. You get AKS on HCI, so you can deploy your Kubernetes to a single node. You get management through the Azure portal, billing and registration, all there. It's ideal for environments with, no data center infrastructure, where cost can be, an issue. Retail, quite honestly, if you have 1,000 locations, the difference between buying 1 server and 2, well, it's twice as much. Locations that are environmentally challenging, and places where honestly it's just I need a little bit of compute. I just need a few VMs and a few containers, and you know what? A tower form factor will be more than enough. Well, guess what? Azure Stack HCI single node is here. So with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it off to Christine. Christine, why don't you talk about some of the work that we've done together?
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. Intel's been partnering and co-investing with Microsoft to capitalize on the potential of HCI to accelerate digital transformation. We've co-developed end-to-end solutions, especially our Intel Select solutions for Azure Stack HCI. We've funded and showcased benchmarking proof points to show the performance capabilities of HCI on different platforms, as well as the value from a price performance perspective, as Jeff showed you on one of his earlier slides. We've integrated hardware-enhanced security technologies to thwart malicious exploits and maintain workload integrity while reducing performance overhead. We've been co-engineering with Microsoft to help them take advantage of the latest technologies to better address users' pain points and opportunities. This includes things like our libraries and tools, and we also help them drive industry standards and contribute optimizations to open source software. And our Intel virtualization technologies make it easier to migrate workloads between both different generations of hardware and between clouds. So let me share a bit more on each of these areas. First, at Intel, we see how customers are demanding a more scalable and flexible compute infrastructure to support their increasing and changing workload demands. The broad range of SKUs that we've made available with the third generation of Intel Xeon scalable processors enables organizations to tailor the compute resources available for different workloads and meet those requirements. Intel virtualization technologies, now in its 6th generation, enables that live migration of VMs across generations and clouds. More about that on the next slide. And Intel's long delivered hardware enhanced security, but in this 3rd generation of Xeon, we have integrated multiple security technologies into the silicon itself, providing this trusted foundation while reducing the performance overhead. Our 3rd generation Xeon also includes Intel Deep Learning Boost, which is a built-in accelerator for inference workloads in AI. This is particularly well suited for edge deployments where you may not have the space, the power, the cooling to handle a discrete accelerator for AI. Second, our Intel Optane persistent memory. Optane PMEM can be used in HCI solutions to provide larger amounts of memory to applications affordably and enable larger data sets to be run in memory for analytics. It can be also used as persistent storage for certain applications like in-memory databases that might be running on your hyperconverged infrastructure. Our Intel Optane SSDs combine the attributes of memory and storage to deliver this industry-leading combination of super low latency, high endurance, quality of service, and high throughput that's really been optimized to break through storage bottlenecks. This technology delivers an optimal solution for the cache tier in HCI solutions. And then our Intel Ethernet 800 series, which has been optimized specifically for virtualized server environments to deliver outstanding I/O performance. I/O bottlenecks are reduced through intelligent offloads, enabling near-native performance and VM scalability. And there's also performance optimizations for LAN traffic that leverage the computing power of the Xeon processor where appropriate, and then implement complementary accelerations in the network controller. By employing this balanced hybrid of compute and offload, we're able to achieve an optimized performance and efficiency. And these NICs support RDMA as well to streamline and accelerate that network traffic between nodes. A little bit more here on Intel virtualization technology. Be sure to deploy infrastructure and clouds with consistent underlying Intel architecture. And that consistency, of course, extends across the software, as Jeff discussed with Azure Arc, Azure, Azure Stack HCI, but it's important from a hardware perspective as well. All Intel-based clouds are optimized for live migration between clouds and migration across generations of hardware, so that you don't end up with any isolated resources. It's really essential here to examine and evaluate the infrastructure that underlies the different instance types you're evaluating. Each instance does offer different capabilities, different generations of hardware, different security levels, and you want to ensure that the instances you choose are going to meet the requirements of your modernized workload, both in terms of performance and security. Intel measures and publishes guidance on this, both across different VM sizes and across different types of workloads. And you can see the link here to that information. Security is a core pillar to any transformation strategy, and it's crucial for distributed multi-cloud workloads. Security is only as good as the layer before it. You can have the most secure app in the world, but if the OS is compromised, it can spoof that app into thinking it's okay. And as the security and the software layers improve, attackers are increasingly moving down the stack to look for new vulnerabilities. That's why you need to start with security at the lowest layer possible, the silicon, and then you can build solutions atop that trusted foundation. Intel and Microsoft have partnered in developing and implementing several key security technologies. Secured Core Server builds upon the foundation provided by the Trusted Platform module in your server, but it simplifies security with easier configuration through Windows Admin Center and broad OEM support. It provides in-depth protection across multiple layers of hardware, firmware, and OS, and it proactively disrupts active vectors to protect sensitive assets like credentials. Intel Total Memory Encryption and Total Memory Encryption multi-key extends data at rest protection to data at runtime protection, encrypting the entire memory in Azure Stack HCI. And in the case of the multi-key version, that's with up to 64 hardware-generated keys. The hypervisor can assign these keys using the third generation Xeon Scalable processors to isolate the memory and provide per VM encryption. This allows your existing software to run unmodified while better protecting the data in memory. With this, the memory is holistically encrypted across the platform, and the VMs have separate encryption to protect VM memory data between each other on the same hypervisor. And Intel Crypto Acceleration helps protect your data at rest by accelerating performance across a host of cryptographic algorithms. Azure Stack HCI has integrated vector AES instructions and extensions to the secure hash algorithm, which reduces the performance impact of pervasive encryption, making it possible for users to broadly encrypt their data without trading off performance. By working with Microsoft, these Intel-based solutions reduce risk and complexity, ensuring optimal performance and improving your operational efficiencies across both data center and cloud services. Intel Optane technology, one of our biggest innovations yet, a new memory tier. Intel Optane technology delivers a new tier of products that fit between traditional DRAM and storage. Optane persistent memory in the DIMM form factor can provide larger amounts of memory affordably for applications that can benefit from that. It can also enable larger data sets to be analyzed, for example, or more VDI users to be supported on the same cluster, all while lowering your total cost of ownership. For superfast storage, Intel Optane SSDs provide consistent low latencies and super high endurance, ideal for the storage cache tier in an HCI cluster. But let's bring it all together with solutions. Customers need technology that's easy to deploy, that's pre-validated, that's battle-tested, so they can deploy and execute with confidence. Well, it's great to have a wide range of options, It's also time and resource intensive for customers to evaluate all these options to determine what will meet their requirements. That's where Intel Select Solutions come in. They're predefined, workload-optimized configurations that are designed to simplify and accelerate your infrastructure evaluation and deployment. These solutions have been tested and optimized to meet or exceed a performance level, so you know what you can expect from that type of configuration. Intel Select Solutions are available from multiple server platform manufacturers, and they can support a wide variety of workloads ranging from the data center to the edge. Our Intel Select Solutions for Microsoft Azure Stack HCI have optimized configurations for edge and for data center. And we've performed rigorous benchmarking on multiple different configuration options to compare on both compute and on storage benchmarks to arrive at not just great performance, but also optimized price performance for key workloads. These reduce your time to evaluate, to select, and purchase, streamlining the time to deploy new infrastructure. All right, with that, let me pass it back to Barbara.
All right, thank you, Christine. That was great. And so before we wrap up, I'm going to go back to Carol for some final closing thoughts. Carol?
Thanks, Barbara. I'll provide a brief recap of the hyperconverged infrastructure trends we expect to see moving forward. The use of hyperconverged infrastructure will continue to grow among enterprises of all sizes. Most of them now use hyperconverged infrastructure for mission-critical workloads, and they'll use it even more for them as vendors address their needs for better quality service, higher performance, memory and storage capacity on their HCI nodes, and faster local recovery options. Our research shows that most enterprises use hyperconverged infrastructure in core data centers and colo sites now, but it's also quite common and likely to increase at edge locations, especially as enterprises modernize their IT infrastructure and replace their traditional three-tier architectures in pursuit of digital transformation initiatives. Enterprises need to simplify deployment and management to stay agile as they build out cloud-native, containerized applications to gain greater business benefit from the data they're collecting. They also need infrastructure that can deploy flexibly across hybrid cloud environments and unify management. Software-defined hyper-converged infrastructure is well suited to meet their hybrid cloud needs and will, as I said, continue to grow well into the future. Now I'll give Jeff and Christine a chance to share their closing thoughts.
Thank you, Carol. So to just kind of summarize some of the thoughts for today, just to be clear, the goal of Azure Stack HCI and Arc and Azure Arc is to deliver the best of Azure to you on your servers that you control on your premises. Just want to be super clear about that. And as we've talked about throughout this day, Azure Stack HCI reduces complexity, takes advantage of the latest hardware innovation, persistent memory, RDMA, secured core, and this result is the highest performing HCI solution and is architected to scale with your organization and now going as low as a single node. And finally, the big thing I want to point out is, again, with Azure Stack HCI, this operational consistency, this cloud consistency, this is built in. This is not an add-on. This is not an extra. It is built right in, being able to manage it from the cloud so that your cloud and your on-prem HCI infrastructure are the same. And that means ultimately lower OpEx, because instead of training and retraining and bespoke solutions, you're actually using the same solution across cloud and on-prem. Christine?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Intel's broad portfolio and our integrated accelerators provide you the flexibility and the scalability to tailor your infrastructure to meet workload requirements. Infrastructure consistency, whether that's hardware consistency or software consistency, is really what enables that workload placement agility for you, whether that's on your on-premise private cloud, across multiple public clouds, and even edge. And finally, our Intel Select solutions for Azure Stack HCI can streamline the time to deploy that new infrastructure so you can deploy and execute with confidence. We have an IDC Spotlight ebook that builds on the message we've shared today on hyperconverged and its growing use for mission-critical workloads in hybrid cloud environments. Please download this today to find out more. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christine. That was great. And that's a wrap for today's session. Thanks again to my speakers, Carol Silwa from IDC, Jeff Woolsey from Microsoft, and Christine McMonigal from Intel for their information and insights. And thanks to you for joining us. For more information, check out any or all of the additional resources shown here. For CIO, IDC, Microsoft, and Intel, I'm Barbara Call.